Usiongee mingi, wacha kelele tu kwa Mungu. Nikuonyeshe ndio wewe. Jaribu kukupa hiyo ngumi, nikuonyeshe mwanamke anakaa na mwanamke anakaa.
Ndio. Nimestabilize sasa, unaniona?
Mawe imeanza kuingia. Wameua. Awacha tu press waingie peke yao. Record peke yao. Wanapata evidence ya kwanza. Hiyo nyingine wameua. Haya, funga hapo.
Mchunge mawe inatoka huku mzee. Mawe. Piga nduru. Brother, mimi sina ngo. Nilielewa what you are saying. Si ndio? Kubwa.
Ndani muniue. Ulole ya. Unataka mali yake. Ndani muniue. Ndani muniue. Give me quick.
Wapi lazima leo sitaka siwe na flavor.
Wewe jamaa ameenda.
Jamaa gani?
Yeye yuko hapo nyuma.
And you're watching the live pictures coming to you from Karatina in Nyeri County, where police and protesters were engaged in running battles since morning, and that is the situation in the county of Karatina, in the county of Nyeri, where our reporter Kamawangi and his videographer Evantas Maina are. It's also the same situation in the county of Nairobi, where the protests were largely concentrated in the central business district and not the outlying areas, where police had managed to keep off the protesters from accessing Kenyatta Avenue since morning along Kimathi Street. And also Marian Nyambura had given us the account from the county of Nyakuru, so did Crispin from the county of Kisii, and as well Francis Mtalaki in Mombasa County, and Laura Otieno from the county of Kisii. And these are the demonstrations that have denounced the Finance Bill 2024, now withdrawn following the events of the 25th of June, when the demonstrators had briefly overrun Parliament, and members of the National Assembly who were forced to flee as a result of the situation. The president thereafter, a day later, announced the withdrawal of the bill that the protesters said had contained punitive taxation measures. Among other major policy pronouncements that followed the withdrawal of the bill included the scrapping of the state funding for the office of the First Lady, as well as the president coming on the X space to engage youthful Kenyans online and filling questions and responding to some of the concerns that were raised, also banning the harambes that public officials normally take part in, saying that the Attorney General now dismissed, or the Office of the Attorney General will come up with the underpinning legislation, and also disbanding his cabinet. MPs who were forced to lie low in the aftermath of Parliament's overrunning by the protesters yesterday. Some appeared with the president in Nakuru County, where he as well accused foreign elements of backing the protests here in the country, but the protesters are not willing to back down, calling for an end to corruption, injustice and inequality. What we had witnessed today are some of the organized protests across major counties in the country. With me in the studio is Kevin Osido, who has been with us since the last 2 hours as we take account of what has been happening across the counties where I have listed. Kevin, yesterday the president also cited foreigners as those who are funding the protests, saying that they either appreciate Kenya's democracy, style up, or ship out. He meant the Ford Foundation. And it's not surprising, is it, that blame must fall somewhere for the government?
Precisely. It is quite a surprising narrative from His Excellency the President, and it really shows the gaps in terms of agencies and institutions that are supposed to assist the president in his leadership and governance of the country. And some of these include the DCI, or the intelligence, either NIS, National Intelligence Service, working with the investigative arm, but really largely the NIS. And it reminds me of a time when I think one of those big two indicated that there were big issues with some of those state agencies that they work with, so that the kind of information that the president receives should be quite factual, with zero to almost no doubt. That when you mention an organization like the Ford Foundation, of course, I'm sure that it will not stop there. And I've seen that the foundation has also made some rebuttal or a response to the president's comments. But I liked the rebuttal because he's reminding the president that even as you talk about us as having created some emergencies, some issues within your government, we have supported and worked with your government in a number of issues. And in some of these, you have been personally present. And in some of the photos that were attached there, of course, the president of the Ford Foundation, Mheshimiwa Darren Walker, indicating that he attended the state function that was put in respect to our president when he attended, when he was there for the state visit of the United States of America. They also indicated that they supported the Africa Climate Summit, which was hosted by our president, which was one of those global checkpoints, or if not milestones, in the climate governance conversations, and many, many other things. How Ford Foundation works, and I think the long and short of it is that you cannot blame the teacher for having empowered the student, even if it is true that some of the organizations that are purportedly assumed to have participated in these protests. Of course, the Gen Zs have said we are leaderless, we are fearless, we do not have anyone supporting us. And I remember even in one of the clips, they were pushing away some of the very obviously expected or suspected leaders of the civil society, and they were saying, you are not our leader, go away, we don't know you on this one, wewe sio kiongozi wetu. And so to get back to an organization like Ford Foundation, that whose processes of grant making are very clear, they have global contributors, and for you to get a grant from the Ford Foundation,
yes,
there's a process that you also go through. As a grantee, you apply, they undertake audits, they undertake those capacity assessment of the organizations. I say this because I know, having been a grantee of the Ford Foundation, and some of the processes that we undertook with some of the counties that we worked in, particularly for the strengthening health engagement with citizens of Nairobi County, have really paid back. And today, if you walk to some of those facilities that we partnered with, you can actually count a lot of progress that has been made. So the president, in my view, needs to probably be properly advised by Foreign Affairs and the agencies that deal with bilateral engagements in our country, and particularly he should be able to listen and just gather evidence and information before a statement like he made really speaks out. So there are two things here, Abdikadir. One is that the president knows that indeed the Ford Foundation supported or financed these processes, or on the other side, propagandists are feeding our president with propaganda information, and that is a little bit disturbing. It is clearly unfortunate, and I think it does not set foot even for other processes and other organizations that would want to work with the civil society and even the government of the Republic of Kenya.
And they said in the much-awaited statement, since 1963, the Ford Foundation has a rich history of commitment to ensuring the independence of East Africa's democratic institutions, including our support for civil servants and technical experts who help establish an independent Kenya. While we acknowledge, they added, the right of Kenyans to peacefully advocate for a just and equitable country, we stress any actions or speech that are hateful or advocate violence against any institution, individual or community. We do not fund or sponsor the recent protests against the finance bill, and have a strictly non-partisan policy for all our grant making. And this is in a stark opposite of what the president said following the accusations he labeled against the foundation as funding instability, chaos, and what he termed as an affront on our democracy.
Yeah, quite the opposite, because in fact in some of those documents, and they are available online, if you go through them, they even assess your allegiance to any political formations. They even ask you whether any of your board members belong to any political party. They ask you about your submissiveness to any political persuasions in the country. And I think those are clear marks that really indicate an organization that is apolitical, an organization that is disinterested in any political aspirations. And as I said earlier on, if the contributions of the Ford Foundation and many other organizations, because there are quite a number of foundations that engage with governance and justice, law and order, and many other aspects of service delivery, including health, agriculture, and so many of them. If they empower the citizens and they're able to empower the communities to be able to ask the right questions that even see to it that offices like the presidency and in the person of His Excellency the President respond to it, to the extent that he even dissolves his cabinet, he withdraws a finance bill which people are uncomfortable with, then that is those are progressive aspects, Abdi, that I don't think should be attributed to an organization that is working so hard, as you have read from their statement, to be able to provide spaces for citizens to learn, for their awareness to be emboldened, and for the opportunity to hold their government's account. So I think those are concerns that maybe the president and his handlers will need to think through. And I think our foreign affairs protocols, in terms of looking at how we engage with other agencies and other countries, I think will really come to the fore. And it baffles me because, as we also heard, we have not seen a clear response. For example, in a number of the X charts, and even on the streets, we saw placards of people saying, reject the World Bank finance bill, reject the IMF finance bill. We have not seen, in an equal measure, the government coming up to really distance itself from World Bank and IMF having been presumably been part of crafting the finance bill. And I think that is a double speak from His Excellency the President, but it's a good thing because it speaks a lot in terms of how, as a country, we also intend to engage with our friends who inform the high commissions, the embassies, and so many other foundations and private sector institutions.
Yeah, and then with the yesterday's a tour of, in a development tour of Nakuru County, the President also talked about pledges that he made and promises in the construction of projects, some that are there needing refurbishment, and explaining the cause as to why it's key as to embarking on that path. It seems he is more or less now a reset button for the President, given what we had witnessed of a month or more where he was largely confined to thinking about making major policy pronouncements or decisions, and now coming back to his traditional personality where he speaks to the populace through the sunroof of the presidential car, and also making largely statements that in public yesterday appeared to be what he fancies most as his trademark.
And these actions, Abdi, need to inform the next phase of the cabinet. I would be very uncomfortable with a president who wants to be everywhere. He wants to be the one to open border sheds. He wants to be the one to open, markets like what he did in Nakuru. He wants to be the one to address all worshippers every Sunday. He wants to be the one to go to football tournaments every Saturday. The president should be presidential. And there is a very clear historical governance and leadership aspirations of the presidency of a president, and why you are expected to engage in a presidential manner. And if you look at in some of the jurisdictions, these are people who are expected to be to hold a zero iota of doubt. Where, for instance, when you speak, your word is, I wouldn't say law because we have a constitution that really protects the sovereignty of the people, but your word is expected to be a word that people can be able to rely and have faith and trust in. And that is why the president should be very keen in terms of the people that he appoints to his cabinet, to be able to therefore do the kind of things that we are seeing him doing. Because having observed President William Ruto when he was deputy president, and even before then when he was MP for Eldoret North, yes, and his growth in the
cabinet minister in the Grand Coalition.
Exactly, even a cabinet minister in the Grand Coalition and all that. I think that President William Ruto is making more mistakes as president, as opposed to as a deputy president, as opposed to a cabinet minister. Of course, he made some mistakes there. He was fired sometime, I think, and even more mistakes as opposed to when he was an MP. And it is expected that now he is president. But part of the reasons why these mistakes are being made is because our president is talking too much and is promising so much that ultimately he is unable to deliver. And in his inability to deliver also rises the question of the uncertainties surrounding his preparedness, to be able to drive the government for the remaining part of his presidency, and indeed even the readiness to govern. Because those are some of the questions that people raised when he took over the reins of power. I remember when he was reading to us the names of his cabinet on the grounds of State House, when it came to, I think, the Inspector General of Police,
yeah,
he was... Yeah. I think that was IG.
The former IG.
Yeah, the former IG.
Yes, yeah.
And it was like there was something going on. There was some conversations going on with the IG. And he looked quite unprepared. He looked a little bit disgruntled and misinformed, even about conversations that are supposed to go on to inform the people that he is appointing to critical offices like the Inspector General of Police. And voila, the IG resigned, And this points back to the readiness to govern as a president. So coming back to the people, and you want to be the same person, I think that will be asking too much to the president, and is behaving like a master fix-it on issues which we expect that people around him should be able to advise him, to guide him, and therefore, of course, listen to him execute as the head of the executive, which is expected by constitution to therefore implement a number of these programs. But that boils down to the so many questions again that people will raise around other agencies like government. The youth will raise concerns about youth fund, where it is expected that part of the reason why they're on the streets is maybe because it's a Tuesday and a whole day is gone because people are demanding for their rights, but their rights that there are institutions in office, institutions of governance and people in office that are supposed to be responding to them. So the president needs to do much of the listening, much of the engagement, and using the other agencies of government to pick information. If it is about youth fund, what is the issue with youth fund? He needs to have asked for a database or a list of the beneficiaries and ask questions around, why am I not seeing critical aspects of our country in the various areas of the counties in this list as beneficiaries? Why are we not seeing the lots of monies that presumably supposed to be given by youth fund or AGPO or the other funds, including women fund, being subjected or being distributed to the critical sectors of the demographics that today we are now seeing on the streets?
Yeah, and with no way forward on the talks that he called for, stakeholders, some feeling not included, no invitation sent to that effect, and as to how the talks will proceed. What then needs to happen? Because he has to reconstitute a cabinet. He said he will engage with other stakeholders, but still it appears that we are into a period of the swinging pendulum, given that we are not ending up with the most important parts of what ought to be happening, for example, reconstitution of the cabinet. But again, he has to consult, as he said in his on Thursday last week during an address to the nation. But that isn't happening, and the Gen Zs aren't relenting either. I mean, the sort of crisis seems to be...
Yeah, the president, again, needs to stop being I know it all. He needs to stop being master fix it. He needs to stop assuming that Kenyans expect all the answers from him. He is not an angel. The president is neither an angel nor is he some strange creature. He's a human being like all of us. And therefore, there is no problem in saying, hapa kwenye nimefika, munisaidie. Now, how to do this, in my view, would be engage with the people who are aggrieved. Because you cannot go to a negotiating table without necessarily focusing on the issues. And the issues have been raised. The president has done very well to concede to some of them. But as a president, as a president and acting presidential, being who the president is expected to be, you cannot keep people guessing and hoping. And there is no sin in opening it up and saying, send me a list of people that you think would be able to fill up these positions. Because ultimately, the vetting is going to be done at the National Assembly, and I'm looking forward to how they are going to get back from their recess when they do in next month. I think it's on 23rd, especially given the lack of authority from Parliament, from the National Assembly. The people went there and took over the sovereignty. They ran away with the mess and all that. How the Speaker, Mheshimiwa Moses Wetangula, is going to reconvene, I think is going to be quite a dramatic aspect. And coming back again with a list or the expectation to vet new cabinet secretaries is going to be another injury to the National Assembly, which the president can be able to cure by purely being a very amiable person to the people. And this is not supposed to be in churches, because the church is a very organized place. You go there as a guest, then you are given your time to speak, which in my view is even awkward. Even as a president, he should stop going to these churches and making the kind of remarks that he is making. The president is able to have his own arrangements and platforms to speak to the people. If he wants to meet with the religious leaders, he is able to do it. If he wants to meet with the born-again Christians and Muslims and Hindus and all the religions, he is able to do so. He should stop taking advantage of closed spaces and have his own spaces where he is inviting Kenyans to be able to share. There is no problem with my friend Hussein Mohammed engaging the president on an X space and just asking him for names of possible candidates for the cabinet secretary, because the Gen Zs have said that we are going to be as detailed on the names of the people that you are going to send to us. And if they have any iota of mud or dirt, we are going to send them back to you. That, Abdi, will dent the execution of mandate of the president, because he will be submitting names which are thrown out, and parliamentarians are also going to be very focused in terms of vetting these people for the fear of being kusalimiwa tena. You send the wrong list and they come to you. They even know where they live. They know where some of them go for lunch or where some of them spend their time on weekends. They will come and say hello to you there. So that really is a proper mechanism of keeping Parliament or National Assembly in check, to also exercise the responsibility to vet the cabinet secretaries.
Okay.
But the president needs to therefore sit back and ask himself, how can I re-engage other than on top of my vehicles and all that?
Are we then likely to see a different scale altogether of public participation when the president names and sends those names to Parliament for vetting? Is it going to be as engaging as we had seen the public focus on issues of good governance?
It is. In fact, this is going to be much more robust. It's going to have a lot of energy. I am sure that even at the gallery of the National Assembly, people will ask to go and sit there. But that is really on the D-Day of the vetting, because this is something that is publicized. They are put on the newspaper, and people pick it up very fast and load it on their even WhatsApp status. So the information about the vetting is going to be very open. But ahead of that, the moment the president names his proposed cabinet, people are going to begin to dig information and to begin to raise concerns if there are concerns to be raised. And the president therefore needs to be clever around that particular time. And if there are issues where, if there are candidates that he probably thinks that are going to be very dirty, quote unquote, in the eye of the Kenyan citizens, don't overemphasize that they have to be in the cabinet, because that is going to make you look unreasonable. It's going to make you look like someone who does not listen. It's going to make you look like somebody who, in fact, even the occurrences where Kenya is at right now, you pay very little attention to some of these issues. So the president has been put between a rock and a hard place, and it's a good thing, because as we said, he is now present, he can engage, but he needs to expand his modalities of engagement. He needs to think beyond the people around him, and even make phone calls to people. If it is Abdikadir you want to put in the ICT docket, make a call to him, have coffee with him, meet with him. There could be people who are even disinterested, especially given the kind of narrations that we have seen. Finally, on this, there is also the expectation that there's going to be a bilateral engagement with the opposition, and that some of the people from Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga's side will also find their faces into the cabinet. If the president has those kind of intentions, I think he needs to also be very open and communicate them to Kenyans, that based on what we have seen, there are individuals that are in the opposition but don't carry the opposition mantle. Is it possible that we can bring them to the cabinet? And I'm sure that given the fact that the narrative around being tribeless and being, broad-based that has been carried by Gen Zs, I don't think they are going to mind if it is Kevin Osido, who might not be a member of Azimio, but is a Luo from the Luo ethnic community that has been nominated into the cabinet and is able to deliver. I don't think that we will be, boldened into going into ethnic engagements. People are now getting much more interested in delivery, efficiency, accountability, and transparency.
Okay, we had talked about the withdrawal of the finance bill by the government, the scrapping of funding for some offices, coming to the express by the president, and disbanding his entire cabinet. These were some of the demands that the Gen Zs had. What then next for them? What do you think is the ultimate goal that they want to achieve?
I am seeing them saying Ruto must go, which is possible, but is also hard. It is possible because the president can decide and say, I am tired. Anyway, I have listened to you. And the way he normally comes, the first time he came, he was breathing fire, and we thought he was going to really abuse us on TV. He even didn't tell us, God bless you and God bless Kenya on his first address. But then on the following day, he came and he was very contained. He was looking fatherly, and he looked very responsive and a little bit shaken. And even finished by saying, God bless you. And in the X chat with the youth, he even prayed for the youth there. So we are hoping that the end goal for this particular process, from the Ruto must go perspective, and in one of the X charts, I think either yesterday or the other day, they were saying, when we say Ruto must go, we mean Ruto and everyone associated with him, including the deputy president. Now, you cannot talk like that in the context of governance in Kenya. because we have a way in which the president is relinquished of his duties. There is a clear mechanism that has to be followed. If it is, and that is only on an impeachment process, or God forbid, the president passes on, or if there is a coup by whoever wants to undertake a coup, of which again there are response measures of coups, and I think Kenya has a sample of a history of the 1982 coup and how it was dealt with. On impeachment processes, there is a role for any citizen who wants to undertake that. It has to go to Parliament. The National Assembly has its mandate. The Senate has its opportunities. And so the Ruto must go perspective, I think, is too hard, is too far-fetched. But the beauty of it, Abdi, is that it is already giving us certain results, and that part of the demands that were made by the Gen Zs or by the youth are already being addressed by the president. So the way forward, therefore, is to identify, even as we talk about leaderless and all these things, is to look at where is this pressure coming from. And it is not in the abductions. You cannot purport to want to speak or to dialogue with people and you are still abducting them. And I'm saying you are still abducting, not in reference to the president, but that he has the opportunity and the responsibility to call the Inspector General of Police or the DCI or whoever is abducting people and ask him, can you stop this issue? He has the power to call for a blanket amnesty for any young person or any Kenyan who is behind bars, having been arrested for participation in this particular demonstrations. And that is the power of the presidency. So for him to be able to move forward, he has to come again with a very clean slate. The president does not have to be seen to be pushed, like I saw our good friend Linus Kaikai doing, for him to apologize for families that had been shot by the police. In his presidency, he said that no Kenyan will lose any life under my watch on a bullet of the police. The president can be humble enough to apologize and say, I am sorry, this has happened under my watch, and we will ensure that this does not repeat itself. And therefore, it softens the hearts and the minds of the Kenyans who are still holding certain aggravations, and people who still have hard stances in terms of looking at what I would call a BATNA, a best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Because this is a negotiation that is going on, and it is going on because failure to respond to some of these issues, these demonstrations that we are seeing, are going to continue happening. As they happen, Kenya is losing its GDP, we are losing income, and services really are not being delivered to the...
And that was the next point of my question line, which is on then the effect this has on businesses and livelihoods. Have you seen Central Business District, where the protests were concentrated in Nairobi, had many businesses shut down because of safety concerns? Some were looted in Kitengela, as our reporter Melita Oletenges in Kitengela had briefed us, and also some other parts of the country where they had broken into business premises. This is not the objective of the protest, is it? And rather one that had called for good governance.
This is not the objective of the protests. But it is happening this way because even as a country and as a people, we have failed to be able to protect the constitutional aspirations of right to protest, Article 37 of the Constitution. And in certain jurisdictions, as we were discussing earlier on, there are special spaces that have been set aside for protesters, for demonstrators. And really, protesters are even protected by the law enforcement agencies or the police, and you are told, we will open up the space for you to go and protest, do everything that you want to do. If you have a petition, because a protest must have an output, where you either present a petition, you have a memorandum, or the prayers to whoever you are protesting against. What we are seeing currently, because the protesters already presented their petitions, as we have said, Abdikadir, a number of those demands have already been met by the president and of course the government. And we are seeing even that going down to the counties, because the counties are also not being left out of this. And even in all the other government agencies, whether it is KEMSA, whether it is National Cereals and Produce Board, whatever we are seeing happening with the national government is going to get to those levels. But we need to begin to think through how we salvage, especially for the business communities, the opportunities that we have insofar as creating income for the country is concerned. If people want to demonstrate and to protest, I am hoping that the acting Inspector General of Police will learn a few things from this process. Abdi, I have led protests in the past. And when I am aggrieved and people don't listen to me,
Yeah.
I will still lead protests. But the experience that I have seen is a very amiable opportunity to engage with the police, where they even tell you, you give us a notice and we will even assign police officers to escort you. And the reason why that is happening is because even for the CBD, you have different command divisions.
Yes.
There is, when you get to EACC, that is where Central Police ends.
Yeah.
And so Kilimani Police starts from there. When you move towards Mombasa Road, there is another jurisdiction. You move towards Westlands, there is another jurisdiction. This is information that you get to know when you engage with the OCS and the OCPD. And in that engagement, they tell you the do's and the don'ts. Like in this particular case, the Gen Zs actually even had a dress code and they would share it out, except for the infiltrators. We would want to see the acting Inspector General dealing firmly with those who infiltrate peaceful demonstrations, and the agencies like IPOA in terms of now informing how we move forward, dealing very viciously also with police officers who are suspected to have used live bullets to kill innocent and peaceful protesters. That, in my view, is a proper way for us to be able to move forward, healing the souls of those who are hurting,
yes,
healing the wounds of those who are in hospitals. And government also needs to come up and say, for the businesses that were destroyed, we take note of this. I have not seen Nairobi County, for example, holding a meeting with people who lost their businesses. It is a positive gesture, even if you want to do nothing about it, but at least show concern, show some empathy, and national government begin to talk to Kenyans about even the opportunity to take some of the costs of the hospital bills and even the bills of the funerals or of the burials of those who lost their lives.
And given the limelight Kenya has been under in the past few weeks following the demonstrations, is this likely going to also affect the foreign direct investments over fears of stability? Precisely.
And if you look at the economic projections, including the latest projections from Treasury, FDI is the foreign direct investments and diaspora remittances really contribute heavily or hugely towards the resources that come to the country. Now, the beauty of this again is that even for the other countries, they are looking at this from a very positive perspective, and we have seen Kenyans in diaspora also demonstrating in solidarity with the locals here. And now this is supposed to really help us to profile the country positively as a democratic state, as a country where citizens actually exercise the right to information, right to assemble, basically implementing the constitution. Now, moving forward is for the government to work towards rebuilding that confidence, because if you listen to a number of the questions relate to corruption and the misuse of public resources, a lot of it which is coming from diaspora. If you also listen to the narratives or the conversations on corruption, we have programs and projects that have been done using public debt, and that part of the taxes that we are having as a country are actually going into payment of these debts. Now, the debt contribution, the resources that are being contributed really boil back to the friends of Kenya who are also in diaspora. So the government needs to come up with a very strong debt management strategy, which of course is there, but I don't know why we do not implement it to the extent that we have to put in place an unconstitutional and illegal task force to be able to advise government on how to navigate around this. But we are hoping that government will begin to learn from these mistakes and really come up with mechanisms to communicate around our debt, and also even communication around the strategies that have been put to be able to address to these debt margins, and largely in terms of boosting the diaspora confidence that the monies that you remit to the Republic of Kenya is really going out to deal with certain service areas that are very critical both to the government and to the people, failure to which of course indeed we will see the reduction of the remittances and also the foreign debt investments.
And given that Thursday is also another day, presumably in the week, where demonstrations will be countrywide as per the announcements given by the Gen Zs, this requires some sort of sobriety, isn't it?
It does,
to address
it.
And with the national dialogue now that the head of state called for not happening, what then ought to be forthcoming from the head of state in terms of communicating to the country?
The intelligence knows the people who are behind the leaderless Gen Z organizing and demonstrations. And if you ask certain people, even the genesis of these demonstrations is known, and government knows them. I mean, government knows the genesis of these demonstrations. So how we respond to these issues, including the call that Ruto must go. The president needs to be, as much as we are talking about listening a lot, but he also needs to speak strategically. And in speaking strategically is to speak while in response to the demands, but strategically in terms of addressing the what you called the end goal, which is Ruto must go, because that is really, quote unquote, quite hard and also harsh. But to cost us 2 days in a week is really a big dent to the economy. It is a big dent to a number of issues. I imagine people who traveled in the morning to go to Kenyatta National Hospital because they had appointments with doctors. And because they came in the morning before the demonstrations began, the doctor is locked somewhere and is unable to travel. I imagine those who are expected to go for biometrics at, Nyayo House on their passports and all that. And they have, and everybody who has something to do. So the government needs to come up with a modality of bringing this to a closure. And it is because when the notice is issued, the intelligence of this country, to the extent that they knew that Ford Foundation is sponsoring,
yes,
go to Ford on Upper Hill, Raimtula Towers, and speak to the regional director or to the program officers and ask them, show us who you are working with to finance. Then go back and say, now let's engage with these people who are being funded.
Thank you.
Because whatever information that government has, it is supposed to help us to address this issue faster and quicker. And if it is upon the president that he wants to resign,
yes,
please make it public and leave, so that Kenyans can begin to think through how we pick up the pieces.
Thank you, Kevin Osido, for your time here from the County Governance Watch. You're watching the live pictures from Karatina in Nyeri County, where police are patrolling the streets where they have been engaging protesters this afternoon in the county of Nyeri, and our team had the live proceedings from the county where this was all unfolding in Karatina, the county of Nyeri, as well as the events that had happened in Nairobi's majorly Nairobi Central Business District, where the protests were concentrated and not the outlying areas of the county. And our reporter Emmanuel Toh has been keeping an eye on that bit. From Kisumu County, Laura Otieno and her camera person were also on that bit, and also Crispin Otieno from the county of Kisii, who has since morning been scanning the area. Francis Mtalaki from the county of Mombasa, Marian Nyambura and her camera person as well have been in the county of Nakuru to give us an assessment of the events as they transpired. They follow yesterday's statement by President William Ruto, who said that the Ford Foundation is funding the protests in the country, and that, according to him, quote, our youth are not available for retrogressive assignments. Those sponsoring them to cause violence and mayhem must be ashamed of themselves. Thank you for watching this special coverage here on the broadcast on a day that the Gen Zs have billed as a Tuesday protest day here across the country, demanding for more governance measures from the government, despite the major concessions made by the government, including the withdrawal of the Finance Bill 2024 and last week's disbanding of his entire cabinet by the president. They are calling for an end to corruption, injustice and inequality, and we will be having more regarding what has been happening across the country in our following news sessions at 7 and at 9 p.m. I am Ayub Abdikadir. Thank you for watching and good afternoon.